On a $200 million yacht docked in Monaco's harbor, a middle-aged woman in faded jeans and an old wide-brimmed hat steps aboard and instantly becomes the subject of mockery. No one knows she is not only the owner of that vessel, but also the entire glittering fleet anchored under the moonlight. As the laughter fades, the truth rises, and those who mocked her are left to silently reconsider themselves. But that revelation is only the beginning. For what makes Maria Delgado truly remarkable is not the wealth she commands, but the way she chooses to forgive, to lead, and to do kindnesses no one ever knows about. Chapter 1, The Woman No One Expected. They didn't see her walk in, not because she was quiet, but because they didn't think they needed to look. The night party aboard the Artemis, the brightest jewel of Monaco's harbor, was where the named came to affirm their status. Golden lights poured over the polished wooden deck like fine wine, and the clink of crystal glasses rang out like a symphony for the elite. And then she appeared. A woman with no name, no introduction, not on the guest list, at least not in their memory. She wore faded gray jeans, a simple white boat-neck blouse, and scuffed leather flats. On her head was a beige wide-brimmed hat, the kind you'd see at a flea market, rather than in a high-fashion collection. She smiled faintly, her eyes scanning the space, as if it were her 1,000th time standing there. But to those sipping $1,000 Dom Perignon, her presence evoked one feeling out of place. "Who's that A?" whisper. "Probably someone who boarded the wrong yacht." A soft laugh followed by a ripple of more. At the stern, Charles Whitmore stood by the elegant bar, gently swirling his cognac as if stirring a piece of the world. Charles wore an ivory suit with a deep red pocket square, a detail he prided as evoking subtle power. He looked at the woman with a mix of amusement and disdain, then turned to Leela, an influencer live streaming the party to over 3 million followers. "Some maid let off early," Charles quipped, half joking, half serious. Leela giggled, scrolling her phone, then filmed the woman adding a snarky caption. "Vintage doesn't always work on a yacht, ladies." As laughter rippled like gentle waves around the yacht, a small gesture caught some eyes, then was quickly ignored. The captain emerged from the bridge, giving the woman a slow, respectful nod. Not too deep, but unmistakable in its deference. Then a female crew member pressed her earpiece and spoke softly, just audible. "She's on board." Like a code. The woman Maria paid no mind to the stares or whispers. She walked the deck as if strolling through her own garden, her gaze lingering on the polished wood, the sleek stainless steel railings, the passing figures, all with an uncanny calm. At the dock's edge, a glossy black sedan, a Mercedes Maybach reserved for heads of state, sat silently. Its headlights glowed, engine humming, rear door open with no driver stepping out, just waiting. Now some guests began to sense something was off, not because the woman deserved ridicule, but because they weren't sure who she was. A few anxious glances darted to the crew, who usually ignored the guests, but now seemed keenly aware of this woman. A middle-aged man in a tuxedo approached Charles, lowering his voice. "Are you sure she's not someone important?" Charles scoffed, raising his glass, glancing at Maria. "Trust me, important people don't dress like that." But even Charles, the loudest laugher on board, wasn't finding it so funny anymore. Something in the woman's eyes felt familiar. He brushed it off. To him, memories were like old wine, potent, but easily replaced by something newer. Meanwhile, Leela kept snapping photos. In her latest selfie, Maria inadvertently appeared in the background, standing by the railing, hair fluttering in the sea breeze. Leela almost deleted the photo, but something made her keep it. She didn't know why. As the party hit its peak, the DJ switching to pulsing electronic beats, small fireworks lighting up the night sky, Maria stood at the yacht's edge as if waiting for something, or someone. A young server carrying a tray of champagne nearly bumped into her, then turned, recognizing the woman. Without a word, she gave a subtle bow and moved on. That look wasn't one of greeting a guest, it was the look of meeting a benefactor. On the bridge, the captain stood in the shadows watching Maria through the glass. He pressed his radio. "Everything okay?" a female voice replied. "Yes." She's as calm as ever. A long silence followed, as if the sea itself were holding its breath for what was coming. Some guests grew uneasy. They didn't know where to look. A few began silently Googling mystery woman on Artemis Yacht, Monaco tonight. Nothing yet. Not yet. Maria finally turned her gaze, sweeping the crowd. Not angry, not cold, just a presence that made the air pause for a beat. And then Charles, still thinking he owned the game, raised his glass, half joking, half serious. Let's toast our mystery guest. Whoever you are, you've at least got the whole party talking about you. Some laughed along, others didn't. Because when Maria looked at Charles, her eyes were no longer those of a guest. They were the eyes of a host listening to guests talk about her. Chapter 2, The Waves No One Saw. Not all waves roar. Some are silent but strong enough to shift entire oceans. Maria Delgado was such a wave. Outside, the Artemis lights danced on Monaco's waters. But in Maria's heart, another memory surged, not of fireworks and champagne, but of salt and sweat of wild winds and fragile boats. 40 years ago, far from Monaco, a young girl sat by an old wooden boat in a small fishing village called Ronda del Mar, southern Spain. While other children chased shadows, she followed her father to sea, learning to read the wind, the depths, and the tiny cracks in a boat's hull like a doctor reading a heartbeat. Her father couldn't read words, but he could fix every screw. He taught her a simple yet profound lesson. You don't need to sail to be free. You need to understand the boat you're on. She remembered the fateful night at 9 years old. A sudden storm swept through, claiming 2 boats in the village. She and her father held fast, securing their boat with ropes tied around their waists, both caked in mud and tears. But they saved the boat. And from that moment, she understood sometimes holding on to the smallest thing is holding on to the future. At 18, Maria left the village with only a suitcase of old books and a hand-drawn nautical chart. No degree, no connections, but an unshakable belief the ocean was a path open to those who dared to understand it. She worked at an old shipyard in Valencia, trading learning for meager meals. By day, she cleaned docks. By night, she hid in the warehouse, poring over payroll logs, shipping schedules, and route maps. She wasn't chasing greatness. She was looking for cracks. Her first opportunity came as a rejection. She offered to buy a derelict fishing boat, rotted, wood-torn sails, and was laughed at. But an old fisherman who once knew her father at the docks lent her a small sum with interest. In faith. Your father saved me from a wreck once. I'm betting on you. Don't make me regret it. Maria spent a year fixing that boat. She worked, learned, sailed, and studied weather charts. That first boat barely broke even, but it was enough to keep others' faith in her alive. She began leasing more boats, trading fish for goods, goods for small contracts. Over a decade, she moved from fishing to dry cargo, then edible oils, rice, electronics. And then one day, standing on a distant port in Singapore, she witnessed a scene that stopped her cold, a group of billionaires taking selfies on a luxury yacht's deck, hashtagging Chalk Yacht Life, while technicians toiled below to keep the engines running. That's when she realized people wanted to own the glamour, not understand how it worked. And in that market, those who truly understood the mechanics would own everything. Maria quietly invested in a fleet of rental yachts. No name attached, no public profile. Shell companies bought, repaired, and managed the vessels. While wealthy clients thought they were living the yacht life, they were merely buying tickets to a stage where Maria was the unseen director. Back in the present aboard the Artemis, the looks were shifting. No longer blatant scorn, but a quiet wariness. This strange woman showed no unease, no need for attention. Every step she took carried the weight of someone walking her own home. Charles Whitmore, still feigning nonchalance, spoke in a lower tone. He was whispering to his assistant, likely searching for her name on the guest list. Nothing. Leila, however, was different. She reviewed the story she'd posted. Maria appeared in the frame not sharply, but her eyes in that moment gave Leila an odd feeling, as if she were the one being scrutinized. At the ship's edge, a bartender whispered to a colleague, "You know she was here once last year," but no one recognized her. They began piecing it together. Maria, meanwhile, stood by the railing, gazing at her fleet anchored below each yacht, silent like warriors awaiting orders. Their names weren't Greek myths, but those of forgotten places, Ronda Marina, Roja, Santa Carla, fishing villages, old ports, lands of memories thought lost to the waves. Each yacht was a marker, a piece of memory forged in metal, wood, and engines. Far off, the Maybach's light still glowed at the dock. Its door remained open. A man in a gray suit stepped out holding a silver briefcase. A crew member whispered into the radio, "The documents are here. She's just waiting for the moment." Just then, from the main deck, Charles raised his glass voice, booming, "Ladies and gentlemen, let's toast to a splendid night. No secrets here, just joy, and a few small surprises." As he finished, Maria turned her eyes, locking onto his. Not a challenge, not a warning, just the look of someone who knew what was coming and knew it would happen on her terms. Chapter 3, The Game-Changing Move. No one knows the pivotal moment in a chess game until the queen steps out of the shadows. Tonight was that moment. The party was at its peak. Music louder. Drinks poured faster. Laughter rang out as if the entire world existed only on this polished wooden deck and the LED lights lining it. Hashtags like Natrum Billionaire vibes and now her life in the water flooded social media relentlessly. Amid the vibrant crowd, Maria stood by the railing, a quiet ripple in the whirlwind. Across the deck, Charles Whitmore raised his glass, his voice commanding as if every gaze were his audience. I once turned down a small European company because it wasn't worth my time. Now they're begging for my investment. Funny, isn't it? Laughter echoed. Maria didn't react. She'd heard too many men like Charles, those who thought arrogance measured success and a loud voice signaled power. Leela nearby quickly filmed a story adding, "When you're rich enough to stop being polite." Maria glanced at them for a moment. Not sad, not angry, just the look of a teacher watching a child misbehave in a class she'd long since mastered. At that moment, a speedboat glided silently alongside the yacht. Few noticed except the crew. A man in a gray suit stepped aboard carrying a gleaming silver briefcase. Without a word, he handed it to the captain, bowed and vanished into the dark. The captain nodded, opened the case, checked its contents, then locked it carefully and passed it to Sophie, the woman who'd shadowed Maria all evening. "Give it to her. Everything's ready." Sophie nodded. Her eyes held something more than duty-silent respect. She approached Maria, placing the briefcase in her hands without explanation. Maria unlocked it with her fingerprint. Inside was a thick stack of documents officially stamped. At the bottom, a small envelope, gray-blue, embossed with the logo of Whitmore Maritime Holdings. She glanced at the papers briefly, then walked toward the center of the deck. No one noticed at first, until she tapped her glass 3 times by the buffet table. The sound was delicate but piercing. The deck froze, not because anyone demanded it, but because something in those taps made people stop. Maria stood tall, holding the envelope, her eyes on Charles. "Mr. Whitmore," she began, her voice low and calm like the sea before a storm, "we met a few years ago. In a meeting you may have forgotten." Charles squinted. "I'm sorry you are." "Maria Delgado. Back then I was the one you offered to buy out for 1/3 of my company's worth. You said women should leave the room when men discuss money." The air grew heavy. Charles gave an awkward laugh, about to retort, but Maria raised the envelope. "I'll keep this brief. These documents confirm that this afternoon your board of directors signed an agreement transferring operational control to my company." A soft clink sounded as she placed the envelope on the nearby table. "I am now the majority shareholder of Whitmore Maritime Holdings and the legal owner of this yacht, and the 4 others anchored behind us." Silence fell like night descending abruptly. Someone dropped a glass. The shatter of crystal rang coldly. Charles was speechless. He looked at Maria as if waking from a dream where the side character had rewritten the script. But before the shock could settle, Leela stepped forward, raising her tablet, her voice trembling slightly. "Wait, there's more." All eyes turned to her. Maria tilted her head, still calm. "An hour ago, an investment group finalized the acquisition of Delgado Group's parent company." A screen flashed. A news ticker read, "Acquisition alert, Helios Capital completes takeover of Delgado Holdings." Maria froze for a moment. Her eyes flickered, not in panic, but clearly this wasn't part of her plan. "And," Leela hesitated, then continued, "that company belongs to me." A wave of murmurs rose. "No way is this real," mixed with quiet astonishment. Maria looked at Leela. Not angry, not worried, just acknowledgement. The young woman who'd mocked her had just played a move no one saw coming. No one. The deck held its breath. Charles was no longer the star. He stepped back, face pale, almost invisible. Maria walked toward Leela, stopping a step away. "I underestimated you," she said softly. Leela pressed her lips together. "I underestimated you too." Their eyes met. Not rivalry, not a generational divide. Just recognition between 2 women once dismissed and now rewriting the rules. Maria turned, walking slowly toward the stern. The night breeze brushed her dress, but inside her was a storm, not from losing control, but because, for the first time in years, someone dared to step into her game and didn't back down. Chapter 4, Rival or Ally. When someone chooses forgiveness over revenge, it's not because they're weak. It's because they've moved beyond the game others are still fighting to win. Leela stood frozen after her bombshell announcement. The sea breeze hummed softly across the Artemis's deck, carrying a silence taut as a bowstring. Eyes darted between Maria and Leela, lost in direction. The unspoken question was another twist coming. Charles had vanished from the spotlight like an extra in a play with a new director. No one noticed him anymore. The focus was now on two women, one mocked for being old, the other dismissed for being too young. Maria looked at Leela, not retreating, not attacking. Her face remained calm, but her eyes had shifted. No longer assessing, but acknowledging. "You move faster than I expected," Maria said, her voice not loud but weighted. "Bold, smart, and you used others' underestimation as leverage. I was like that once." Leela opened her mouth to respond but stopped. This wasn't the reaction she'd braced for. She'd prepared for anger, threats, or exposure, not respect. Maria took a step closer. The digital logistics market was a smart move, especially using the glamour of luxury as a front. People like Charles only see the spotlight. Few bother with the backstage. Leela looked at her, her usually sharp eyes wavering. How long had it been since she'd heard praise, without ulterior motives? Maria turned gently, her gaze drifting to the twinkling port lights. It was as if the night sky itself paused to listen. "I didn't come here to beat anyone. I came to observe and to choose who walks with me." Leela blinked. "Walk with you?" "Yes." Maria turned back, her voice clearer. "We've both proven ourselves in ways no one expected or was ready to accept. But at some point, power isn't something we hold for ourselves alone." The air, strangely, was no longer a battlefield. It felt like a job interview, or deeper, an invitation to a greater journey. Maria continued, "I want you to join me in starting a fund, not just for money, but for time, knowledge, and guidance. For young women entrepreneurs who have no footing, no opportunities, no one who believes in them." Leela froze. She'd received countless partnership offers, but none so gentle yet heavy. "Why me?" she asked, as if doubting her own worth. Maria didn't answer immediately. She stepped to the railing, pointing to the fleet of yachts glowing under the moonlight. "Each one bears the name of a place I've been, where I failed, where I learned to stand. I didn't build this empire for admiration. I built it so no other girl has to beg for a chance like I did." She turned back to Leela. "And I need someone young, bold, and different enough to carry that fire to the next generation. You can choose to fight me or join me, but I'll only ask once." In that moment, Leela was no longer an influencer. She wasn't holding her phone snapping photos. She stood there, a young woman facing something she hadn't prepared for: trust from someone she'd once mocked. Under the warm golden lights, a moment unfolded that no camera captured, no story posted. Leela reached out gently, taking Maria's hand. "I'll join you," she said. "Not for the brand, not for the money, but because maybe for the first time I feel someone wants me to win without fearing I'll take their place." Maria nodded, her eyes glinting with something rare: hope. Not for herself, but for the next generation. For she knew true legacy wasn't in what you held, it was in who you chose to carry the journey forward. In the background, guests began to murmur, but no longer with mockery. It was awe tinged with respect. Two women, one derided as old, the other as shallow, had just rewritten the script of a party everyone thought belonged to men. Charles was no longer the host. Those who laughed now exchanged silent glances, none daring to speak. Sophie, from afar, nodded quietly at the handshake. She understood tonight's story had turned a new chapter, not about who won, but who led the way. Chapter 5, The Ones Never Named. Some people pass through others' lives without leaving a name, only a mark. And sometimes they're the ones who change the wind's direction. The night grew late. The party ended. The last glasses were drained. The music softened to a delicate piano melody humming through hidden speakers. Tired guests drifted toward the gangway, some lingering for photos, but their eyes still stole glances at the two women by the railing. Maria and Leela, no longer host and guest, no longer opposites, but 2 points converging in a rare moment of awakening. Not far off, Sophie, the crew member with neatly tied hair, her dark shirt faded by sea salt, watched from a distance. Then, as if compelled, she approached Leela, lightly touching her arm. "Ms. Leela," Sophie said, voice just audible. "Do you have a minute? I want to tell you something." Leela turned, nodding. They stepped away from the main deck, down a small path toward the Seaview Lounge below. The night breeze carried the scent of damp wood and the restless ocean. "5 years ago, Sophie began. My daughter had a rare blood disorder. We were nearly hopeless. The treatment costs were beyond our family's means. No help, no insurance, no chance." She paused. Leela listened intently, her face no longer that of a celebrity, but of someone learning to be human. Then one day the hospital called. Someone had paid the entire bill. Anonymously, no name, no message. We searched for clues. Nothing. Sophie looked up, her eyes shimmering with tears. Tonight when I saw Ms. Maria step aboard, I knew. I can't explain why. It was just her eyes, the way she never waits to be thanked. Leela said nothing, but her heart tightened. Not just from emotion, but from realization the woman mocked all evening had saved a child no one knew. Quietly, without fanfare. Just doing what was right and walking away as if she'd never been there. Up on the deck, Maria stood alone, gazing at her fleet anchored below. Each yacht glowed under the moonlight like stars reflected on water. But a closer look revealed something unique. Their names weren't grandiose like Majesty or Imperial Pearl, but simple: Ronda Almeria, Carmen Salinas. Names of fishing villages, workers' old memories. Each ship was a piece of a life not famous, but etched into Maria's journey. They didn't make headlines. No statues honored them, but they held an irreplaceable place in her legacy. Leela joined her on the deck, standing silently beside her. For a few minutes they said nothing, just two shadows, one older one, younger, gazing where the moonlight met the water. Finally Leela spoke. I used to think strength was making others step back. And now, Maria asked, eyes still on the fleet. Now, maybe real strength is walking forward without needing applause. Maria turned, her gaze softening like the sea after a storm. She nodded slightly. For the first time that night, she took Leela's hand, not to lead, but to pass something intangible. You're starting to understand, Maria said. And you have more time than I do to do what's right the right way. Far off, the Maybach waited at the dock. The driver opened the rear door unhurried. Leela glanced at it, then asked softly, if you could start over, would you do anything differently? Maria smiled, a smile not sad, not regretful, just deep. Yes, I'd trust others sooner. But maybe, if I hadn't been underestimated so much, I wouldn't have learned to stand alone. The breeze stirred again. Lights from the other yachts began to dim. The party was over, but the night stretched on. Charles left in silence. No one saw him off. No one waved. He stepped onto the dock like a lost traveler, eyes distant. He might not fully grasp what happened, but for the first time he knew he wasn't the center of everything. Sophie stood at the entrance watching Maria pass. She didn't speak, just gave a subtle bow enough to convey gratitude needs no name. Maria stepped into the car, the door closing softly. Leela watched, still feeling the warmth of that handshake. Below, gentle waves lapped against the hull. The water rippled, whispering an old song. Maria didn't look back. She didn't need to. What needed to be left behind was already in the stories no one told, and the hearts that would never forget. In a noisy world, some women choose silence, but their footprints no one can erase. Maria Delgado's story is not just a journey from nothing to a quiet icon of success. It's a delicate symphony of resilience, kindness, and the power of forgiveness. From a fishing village girl on Spain's coast, Maria rose silently to helm an international shipping empire, owning a fleet of luxury yachts no one knew was hers. She didn't need spotlights or fame. What she chose to leave was value, opportunity, gratitude for the small lives that shaped her own. The story also shows one truth: real power doesn't come from the loudest voice, but from the quiet that creates change. Maria didn't retaliate. She didn't need to prove anything. She chose to offer Leela, her former critic, a chance to grow, to carry on, to make amends through action. And that unassuming kindness painted a different portrait of success, not possession, but impact. The story ends, but its echo lingers. In this noisy world, sometimes the most admirable person is the one who walks without sound, leaving only a path. Maria didn't need her name on a monument. She carved it into the hearts of those who received a quiet kindness no one else knew.